consider myself a particularly nostalgic person. I don't have a favorite movie. I love throwing things away. I don't keep a journal. For a few years, my husband, Ben, and I had a question-a-day couples journal. I looked through it recently and found one day where the question was, any fresh flowers in your home right now? Ben wrote, we passed some flowers on our way to dinner tonight. We also saw some cool flowerish wallpaper at the tiki bar we went to after dinner. I wrote, no. There are some exceptions to my general lack of nostalgia. One of the most notable ones is the Hollywood apartment where Ben and I lived from 2010 to 2021. I am extremely nostalgic for that apartment. Ben does not share this particular nostalgia. He's nostalgic for nice things, like our first date or the time we went to Hawaii. I am nostalgic for how one time the entire apartment complex, indoors and outdoors, got fleas. We initially thought the fleas were coming from our cat, but after treating our cat and continuing to find tiny bugs jumping off of our pant legs every time we walked in the door, we realized the whole building, including the courtyard, was infested. You see, one of our neighbors, a nice but addled older woman who had somehow made her way from Belgium to the dirtiest corner of East Hollywood, was an animal lover, which manifested in her giving us a lot of greeting cards from PETA, and also in her feeding the local raccoons. The raccoons brought the fleas, and the fleas came to stay. Remember that, I'll say, with a fondness that completely neglects the fact that this lasted for a whole month. Because our landlord, a Charles Dickens-style slumlord who used to be a judge for the city and whose hobbies included rhinoceros hunting, wanted us to exhaust all of our options before he finally paid a guy to spray. Yes, I remember, Ben will say. That was terrible. And I'll smile and get a faraway look in my eyes and say, that was a great apartment. We moved to that apartment when I was 25. We'd spent several days walking up and down the streets near the Improv Theater we wanted to live close to, looking out for rent signs. And on the same day we were supposed to sign a lease for an apartment just up the street, we saw this place pop up on Craigslist. We went to see it, and a friendly handyman gave us a tour. A handyman we would never see again, because most of the handyman work for the building would be done by our next door neighbor, other than the year he was in jail for getting too many DUIs, but still managed to Airbnb his apartment from jail, so he didn't lose his rent control. But we saw this apartment, and I immediately loved it. It was on the ground level of a 4-unit building tucked at the very end of a walkway lined by little bungalows. It had a front door and a back door and only one shared wall, so it felt like its own tiny little house. We said we were interested in the place, and the handyman asked what our relationship to each other was. We said we were a couple, and he said, oh, I thought you were maybe a set of emancipated siblings who had run away from home. Then, without any follow-up, he gave us a rental application. We had to call the other apartment we were supposed to sign the lease on and tell the landlord that we found another, cheaper place. This other landlord maybe also thought we were a set of runaway children because he seemed genuinely concerned for us. He warned us that we were making a mistake, that an apartment this cheap was cheap for a reason. But he was wrong. This apartment was cheap for dozens of reasons. It was cheap because there was no parking, no AC, no heat, other than a furnace in the bedroom so old and rusty we covered it with a sheet and used it as a shelf. There was a washer-dryer, but it was an illegal one our neighbor put in the backyard, so we couldn't do our laundry when it rained because the dryer filled up with rainwater. It was cheap because there were gaping holes in the base of the building, so the same raccoons our neighbor was feeding would get under our house at night and scratch at the floor directly beneath our bed, so we'd wake up in the middle of the night to something that sounded like a zombie scratching out of a coffin. It was cheap because there was no fridge when we moved in, no stove, and because our Charles Dickens slumlord refused to replace the 1920s wiring, even though one time our upstairs neighbor's fuse box burst into flames. It was a great apartment. distrustful of genuine nostalgia, of nostalgia for a purely good thing. It feels escapist, like retreating into a past that was probably only pleasant because you didn't know better. I think I feel permission to be nostalgic for our old apartment because it was not pleasant. We were not at all insulated from discomfort. In fact, we were often awash in chaos. Like one Halloween when our alcoholic handyman neighbor had some friends or enemies come looking for him around 1 a.m, banging on his back door, which was about 10 feet away from our bedroom window, and screaming, "Halloween's over." Or when the same elderly neighbor who fed the raccoons got bitten by her cat and her foot blew up like a marshmallow and she refused to call an ambulance because it would take her to Presbyterian and she only went to Cedars. I drove her to Cedars, even though one time she told me I needed cold cream for my wrinkles. And another time she said I was getting too soft around my thighs and my butt. During our ride to Cedars, she looked out the window and pointed out other people who she felt were too fat. Then she told me she invented the veggie burger. It was a great apartment. I think I'm also nostalgic because so much life happened in that apartment. It's where Ben and I lived when we went from a young couple giving emancipated runaways to a married couple with a nice coffee grinder. It's where we worked as tutors and PAs and copywriters and commercial actors and Lyft drivers and TV writers. It's where we were living when 3 of my grandparents died. It's where we wrote scripts and built props, and where one time Ben kicked a hole in the wall because he was so upset by how upset I was when I got cut from my first improv team and was sure that my life was definitely, basically over. We later patched that hole by taping a piece of paper over it, with a drawing Ben made for a children's book he wrote and illustrated in that apartment. It's where we got our cat. It's where we came home after confessing to each other at Denny's that we both wanted to return her because having a cat just seemed like too much at the time. And then we went home and found her curled up in the closet and decided she was part of the family. It's where our bathtub filled up with sewage, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but once a year, every year, because roots were growing into our ancient pipes and our slumlord landlord refused to replace them. It's where I was once chased down the street after parking my car by a woman who looked at me and gave me the very straightforward instructions to run, bitch. Here's a fun Hollywood moment. The Run Bitch lady was sitting right across from where they filmed that part in La La Land after Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling dance on the bench. These days, we rent a house on a hill in Glendale, where everyone in Los Angeles goes when they get tired. Our new house still has the requisite strangeness that defines anywhere I've ever lived. Earlier this year, a horde of flying termites burst out of our wall, and our neighbors have included a Wiccan man who howled at the moon and a German lesbian psychiatrist who introduced us to the neighborhood by pointing to everyone's house and telling us who was gay, straight, or deaf. I love where we live. But sometimes I feel like there's a slightly unreal quality to it. Like I have noise-canceling headphones on and can only grasp the muffled contours of just how absolutely insane life can be. And I think I feel nostalgia for a time when I didn't have quite as much insulation, when my life wasn't quite so frictionless. There are parts of who I was in our old apartment that I actually like more than who I am today. I was a person with a higher tolerance for discomfort. I was a person who didn't mind spending 45 minutes parking. Or I did mind it, but I had to do it, so I did it. Last summer, a friend texted me and Ben an article about our old street. The headline read, "Axe-wielding woman torches cars in violent Hollywood Hills rampage." We looked at that article and we were like, yeah, that sounds about right. We watched the video to see if we would recognize the axe-wielding woman as a neighbor. We didn't recognize her, but the building she'd run into to chop someone with her axe was very familiar. It was sort of fun, like when you watch The Studio and you're like, Seth Rogen is driving past my gym. Or when you see the Run Bitch corner in La La Land. This made me glad we're not living in that old apartment. But it also made me miss it. It made me miss the time a SWAT team came to the apartment across from ours because someone had a lot of guns or something, and I met a neighbor who was also from New Jersey. It made me miss the times Ben and I would walk up to the top of the hill on 4th of July and watch the different fireworks displays go off like bursts of confetti all across the city. It made me miss the guy who would play in the middle of the street with his son, letting him drive this loud little remote-controlled car up and down the road at twilight. Pretty dangerous for what a busy street it was, but also kind of fun. Remember that, I said? That was a great apartment. Thanks.